Hi, thank you so much for joining me today. On behalf of the University Innovation Alliance, my name is Bridget Burns, and today we're going to have an awesome opportunity to hear from someone who is, we've spent the past few weeks interviewing folks who are experts in the online and distance learning space, giving advice to folks who are coming in and doing it for the first time. But we're going to finally get a chance to talk to a faculty member who is also a scholar and a researcher and a leader and a practitioner, and get her read on what it's been like to actually transition online rapidly in this changing ecosystem. So I'm really excited to bring on Dr. Kris Renn from Michigan State University. Kris, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, great, Bridget. Thanks so much for having me. It's an exciting and different kind of time, and I think that the videos that UIA has been putting out have been really helpful as people make this really quick pivot that nobody expected to make. So thanks for bringing me on.
Well, it's an honor, especially for folks at home. You don't know this, but Kris is actually one of our OG. We only have 3 original liaisons from the dawn of the UIA, and she's been someone who's been critical to how this organization's evolved. She's been a friend to me. She's been a partner in scheming up how we can better solve things for students, and she's also been the former president of ASH, which is the Association for the Study of Higher Education. So she's someone who has her finger on the pulse of how researchers who are scholars who are concerned about student success and want to make sure that we apply, that we're not just like winging it, that we actually have evidence behind things, that they are in the midst of a moment when we're all having to wing it. This has got to be a really interesting time. So Kris is definitely a leader in a variety of spaces. So long intro, but thank you for being here with us.
Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
So tell us about your circumstances in terms of where you were as a kind of how you did teach, what's going on with MSU, and like what this first little period has been like for you.
Okay, so my history in teaching is that I teach in I'm a professor of higher adult and lifelong education, which is a graduate-only program. So it's unlike most teaching. So it's a online graduate program only. My department at Michigan State, we teach an online master's in higher ed. We have an in-person student affairs higher education master's, and then we have an in-person, mainly PhD. But we have a lot, because of the online master's and because we did an early pivot to online teaching, we've offered a lot of online classes historically. So I've got colleagues with enormous amounts of experience in synchronous classes, asynchronous classes, self-paced classes, like really interesting, cool kind of stuff. I, however, have never taught a class fully online. I've taught chunks of classes online. Through my administrative work at Michigan State on the student success work with the provost office, I got introduced to the very heavy, what I would call Zoom culture at MSU before all this happened. So MSU had a pretty comfortable, we're a physically large campus with people spread all over the state, and often people are out of state or in different parts of the world. So we're really comfortable using distance technologies. Like we are very comfortable doing meetings by Zoom, or, I've got a student who's out collecting data somewhere else. And so they want to come into class by Zoom one week, and they have a friend kind of set up an iPad at a desk and kind of roll them around the room for group work. So we're pretty comfortable with it. And we were pretty comfortable. So we're actually in a faculty meeting with my higher ed faculty colleagues on a Wednesday morning. Michigan State has a very early spring break. So we were out that first week in March, like the week of the 2nd of March. We come back, and we knew things were heating up. We have a new president at Michigan State who has an MD in his background, so he thinks about medicine maybe quicker than some university presidents. So by that Wednesday morning, we were in our higher ed faculty meeting at 10:30, and we got an email during the meeting. Not that we were multitasking and reading our email during the meeting, but maybe we were. We also got the emergency text alert, right? So that Michigan State would go to online teaching immediately. So we got the text at 10:30 in the morning, and at noon, all classes were to be virtual only. And that was quick. So people had to scramble, sitting in a room at that moment with people who were already teaching their classes online, who were comfortable with it. It wasn't as jarring to us as it might be. We're not a department with large undergraduate classes or huge numbers of students even. So we have some sort of privileges going in, our size. Our students are adults. They're all graduate students, and many of them are mid-career or senior, actually working on campuses doing the same thing. So I teach on Wednesdays. So this comes at 10:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to have an online class. We'd actually met that same class the week before break online because it was an ice storm, because it's Michigan. And I didn't want people driving in from an hour away, right? So we were able to do that. But on that call, there's a person who's the vice president of student affairs at a community college. There is a staff member for our state agency for higher education who was busy shutting down other campuses. So it was pretty quick to go, but we've met several times now in this kind of online format. And it, as students of higher education who are my students, as scholars of higher education, which is me and my colleagues, it's an interesting kind of to be both the rat in the laboratory and the scientist studying the rats in the laboratory. I was going to go with a petri dish, but I think that's on the nose for this
I
moment.
am the agar, and also, yes.
Yeah, like the agar, I think we're going to avoid germs.
All of it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what has surprised you about going online? Because this has been something that you previously would not have chosen to do, or you hadn't chosen to do. So I'm curious about, I think some people have stereotypes about online. They have different expectations. I'm curious about what surprised you.
So my surprise is, so I have 19 students. It's a research methods class. So it's not like a lot of people's experience. Most faculty in the country, most instructors are not teaching a class like the one I'm teaching. But there are some commonalities. What's been really exciting as a surprise is how engaged students still are. And although I did make attendance optional for the rest of the semester because I'm recording them and students can catch up and I can talk to them later, online office hours. And so many of them are working full time in really high stress things or parenting. I've got 4 people with newborns. I got kids, all of a sudden, 5, 6-year-olds are at home. So I wanted to give people a chance. They have all shown up every week since then. I've gotten lots of emails. Thanks for that flexibility. I'm going to really, I'll be a little bit late, but I'm going to be there. One of our folks advises Chinese international students. So obviously there was a lot of stuff going on, right? So, but even he was like, no, I'm going to be there. Just trust me, I'll be there. What time's the recording going to be on? Because I'm going to watch it tonight, right? So I think that I've been excited and surprised by how engaged students want to be, even with everything else going on in their lives. Surprised at how much I keep looking forward to it. Like, I think having that, like, okay, we've moved this online, but I see your faces and we nod and we smile and we do a little catching up with each other, like we would when I walked into the classroom the last time I did in February. So that I think has been good, that touch point, that human connection we're making.
So what are the challenges that you've run into that have surprised you, perhaps?
So even as somebody who was pretty comfortable with Zoom already and somewhat facile with the interface. Like I knew how to do some stuff like make breakout rooms, that how to work the chat. So there's lots of stuff. I not a Zoom expert, but I was at least like a middle ranger. The challenges, part of it for me is that, it's a class that meets from 4 to 7 p.m. in person. And what's really challenging is that even in the in-person version, people have already worked a full day before they come. So people are kind of tired, right? But you can kind of shake that off and kind of sit in a chair and do your thing. That's really hard when you're spent the 8 hours before that in other Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings or Teams meetings or whatever your campus is using, or writing emergency documents. It's really exhausting, physically exhausting. So that has been a challenge, and thinking about how do I make sure that I can come to that fresh. I was a student athlete. I was a music performer. I am a performer by nature. So performing for, like, how do I have the energy ready to go in a setting that requires a really different kind of energy from me? That is a challenge. I get headaches when I spend all day looking at a screen and have sound coming into my ears. These are legitimate challenges. One of the kind of unexpected challenges for me was that, with my little headset, I use it because it does help me focus to have the sound coming into my ears, even though it gives me a headache. My students kept saying things like, well, who's not muted? Because we're hearing something. And finally, one of them said, Kris, it's you. Your headphones like swiping against your sweater and making noise, right? So even though I thought I was like all on top of it and like all engaging, and what I was thinking was, oh my gosh, if I were the person in that meeting and heard like, it would drive me nuts, right? So, so some little challenges like that have been kind of working through, but really the physical demands have been a lot. Organization for the course, it's a course that works pretty easily switching it over. So that hasn't been that difficult for me.
Great. Can you share some things that you've been picking up that are maybe tips and tricks to make things as engaging as possible?
Yeah, and there's a million of these things out there now for engaging in meetings and engaging in classes, and the UIA has posted several of these, and every campus has a bunch now, but it's exciting. The one tip I picked up from a tweet actually from a former student, had tweeted a thing. I was like, oh, I love that. Was how to make your cell phone into a document camera. Hack it using soup cans. You stack up soup cans, you put your camera on, you put a soup can on top. And by turning your camera onto Zoom, like signing into Zoom from your phone, you can then share that screen and it will show up on the big screen. That's my favorite hack. And I was so ridiculously proud of it that I almost had to invent a reason to do it in class. But I can see being able to use it for other things too. A document camera so people can see if you need to demonstrate something, or if there were some other visual you wanted to show, or setting up a chemistry experiment in your kitchen, not probably a great idea. But there might be some other things that could be done. Maybe you've got specimens of some kind. You're teaching a course that has like plants or fish, I don't know. But I think there could be some cool uses for that. So that's one of my favorites. I think using breakout rooms creatively has been helpful. I did talk to an undergrad the other day who's in a large class that says one of his struggles is that the breakout rooms, it takes forever for the faculty person to get them in there. I was like, well, there's that assign them randomly button. It just goes fast. So
I haven't used that yet. I haven't done any breakout rooms, and I'm super curious about, like, I don't even know if it's enabled on my Zoom accounts, but that's what we're gonna have to experiment with.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool because you put people in rooms, you as the instructor can visit the rooms, and they can call you, be like, hey, we need your help over here. So it is a way to do some collaborative work, which is kind of
great. Cool. Have you been Zoom bombed? Hopefully not.
Have not been Zoom bombed. My institution is doing a little proactive, has been proactively tweaking the defaults. Our default now is everything has a password.
Good.
Because we did have an incident on campus. So
yeah.
I have not been Zoom. I think I'm not, my classes are small, and I think not enough people care about me or my courses to bother to Zoom bomb them.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that. It's more that if you post it online. On Friday, I did post a link, and within a minute, I had 5. And it was helpful for me to understand what faculty are going through. And I mean, I was just chit-chatting with like 4 people, and I was sweating because it felt like just the feeling of it. And I was like, oh gosh, what are students experiencing in the midst of all this broader kind of trauma? And like, it made me, I'm excited that we're going to try and figure out solutions for this in a quick way.
Yeah, it is amazing to me that people who want to cause harm or mischief would use an occasion like this to do that.
Yeah, I think they're home and bored. Perhaps.
Yes. I mean, it's one thing to, put up a cute picture, but that's
what's
happening really. So,
yeah. Okay. So any other tips that have been useful for you as you try to keep your students engaged?
I think asking my students. So I happen to have a lot of students that are in an adult education program, higher in adult ed. So a lot of them some of them actually teach instructional design, right? So like they know way more about this than I do. So asking my students, what's working for you? What's working for you in your workplace? What's working for you in your family Zoom night? What helps you stay engaged in this? And how often do we need a break? How can you let me know that you need a break? It's a little harder to read than when we're in the classroom together, right? You only get the faces, you don't get the like full slump of the body language. So thinking about asking my students to be real clear with what they need, but also to share like what's going well for them in other classes. Because I think that most students are in more than one class at a time and might be picking up some tips and able to share them that way with instructors. And having a little humility, being willing to be like, hey, tell me that great idea that you're doing on your own campus that is not this place, has been really helpful.
That's great. No, I think students should be co-creators in this experiment, especially because, we should be in a place where we can be transparent that we're all going through this together and we didn't have a plan. So this is an opportunity for us to, design the learning experience that they are going to want in this moment and not just to force it upon them.
One of the stories, Bridget, you tell about your own undergraduate experience starting at a community college, just taking a bunch of classes because you just assumed that somewhere there'd be a grown-up who would not let you make any mistakes. I think that one of the things that this giant social experiment that we're living tells us is, like, to be honest with students, like, oh yeah, no, there's no grown-ups here who know what to do. We have no idea.
Yeah. In fact, we need a grown-up.
Yeah, we could use a grown-up, and we're all trying to become grown-ups really fast all together, which, is interesting, but we're not good at it.
Yeah.
So many mistakes will have been made.
Yes.
to use them.
I think that students are definitely aware of just how human their faculty are. And I feel like we definitely should not have any obsession with polishing up and perfection at this moment because it doesn't exist. Are there any other pieces that you're wrestling with right now that you would impart as kind of final words for folks that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm going to say it's that human part. And I've been working on the concept of enoughness. And for me, that means looking at the learning outcomes for my course from here going forward in the semester and saying, okay, yeah, you sit there and, when you make your syllabus, you announce it in January, and that is like the ideal, right? And that's what you're aiming at. But what's enough? Like, what do I really need to meet the learning outcomes that I promised students? My contract with them. Here's what you're going to learn in this class. This particular class is a qualitative field methods. They're supposed to learn how to collect data and analyze it, right? So I have looked back at my learning outcomes as my North Star to say, what's enough in what remains of the readings? I think shifting some readings out. They're like, oh, it'd be awesome if they have to learn this, but boy, the cherry on top would be this, right? So I've been going with the what's enough, keeping all the other stuff there and talking with them and saying, when you want to get back to this, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here through the summer and happy to talk to you more about like this thing you might have hoped to learn as an extra, but you didn't get to. So going with enoughness in both my readings, my daily class or weekly classes, their final assignment, I've pared back to the enough version and saying, I'll give you feedback on whatever you give me, but this is the minimum. And if you got more, awesome. So enoughness for me, and just really thinking about what does that mean, as somebody who is I'm really proud of my teaching usually. Like I think of myself as a good teacher. I get good feedback on my teaching. I love teaching in person. And what's enough when I can't do that? I can't meet all my students' needs. I could pull it together, but it's going to have to be okay with being enough. And that's what I think that, and there are some of these messages circulating in, popular media and social media around being okay with all of it just being enough and understanding that when you live through disruption or trauma, wherever that falls for people right now, it comes back. The spark comes back, and the more than enough will come back. But just being okay with enough right now, and even sometimes being okay with my students telling me that they can't even be that much right now is also okay. So that I think is the biggest takeaway for me from a lot of this is enoughness, being cool.
I think that's super powerful for us to leave on. So thank you, Kris. You are more than enough. And we are so grateful for the time and the energy and the wisdom that you're pouring into the broader community. And I hope that we get to do this again. And your students are very lucky to have you in this moment. So folks, if you have further questions, you can find Kris at Kris Renn on the Twitters, and she is linked above. And hopefully we'll be bringing her back as a liaison to share with us more as we are going through this experiment together. So everyone have a great day.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.